For this episode of Coffee with Closers, I'm sitting down with Chris Ronzio. He's the founder and CEO of Trainual, a leading SaaS company that helps businesses automate their onboarding and training by documenting every process, policy, and procedures. Chris is also the host of Process Makes Perfect podcast and the author of 100 Hacks to Improve Your Business. Stay tuned for this episode of Coffee with Closers to learn how Chris has built his organization and how he teaches other organizations to use systems and process to scale.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Coffee with Closers, where business leaders share insights on how to build businesses from the ground up and best practices for innovating in their industry.
Hey Chris, I'm super excited to have you join me for this episode of Coffee with Closers.
Thanks for having me. Pumped to be here.
Most certainly. You're a serial entrepreneur. You had a couple of different gigs that you've started before Trainual. And I'm sure you have an interesting story of how you became an entrepreneur. Can you share a little bit about your journey of becoming an entrepreneur?
Yeah, sure. So it started when I was a little kid. I was 4 years old. My uncle asked me if I would wash his car, and he said he would give me $4. And I remember at the time, $4 was exactly enough to buy a Ninja Turtle action figure. So that was like my currency. And after that first car wash, I was washing all the neighbors' cars and just building up my Ninja Turtle collection. And so pretty early on, I realized that you can do work, do a service, do a product, get paid for it, and use that money to buy something you like. And so that equation stuck. So as I grew up, I was always doing little kid businesses and roping in my brother and all of the little neighborhood friends. And we had yard services and house cleaning businesses and painting and lemonade sales and all these things. When I was in high school, I started my first real business, which paid taxes. So that's what I define as real. It had employees, and it was a video production company that did youth sporting events. So we would show up, we'd film an event, and we'd sell VHS tapes at the time that evolved into DVDs and Blu-rays and digital downloads. So that was my first real business. After college, I set up an office, then 2 offices, then 3 offices. We ended up with over 300 camera operators doing events in all 50 states in the US. And so it was a fun experience and really taught me the importance of operating consistently, because every time we had people out doing events for us, they had to represent us and they had to look and feel just like the exactly how we'd operate in a different state. So that just got ingrained in me and ultimately led to creating Trainual.
Awesome. Obviously, like you just described, you became an entrepreneur very young in your life. You've had a couple other gigs that you started, right? Organized Chaos, Design Pickles, now running Trainual. And then also I think you've written a book, The 100 Hacks to Improve Your Business, that's on Amazon. So you're an author, you also have a podcast, you're running a bunch of businesses. Of all the things you've accomplished in your career, what's one thing you're super proud of?
I mean, I'm the most proud of what we're doing right now with Trainual. Like you mentioned some great examples there with Organized Chaos. That was after I sold my video company. I started a little consulting firm or a team of 5. We would go into businesses and totally optimize them, like interview all the employees, figure out their roles, responsibilities, make them more efficient, install technology, sometimes develop custom technology. So we kind of built a muscle for software development through that business. And Trainual actually came out of that company as a prototype, because every time we'd go into a business and rewrite the way that they did things, we had to write up standard operating procedures or create a training day and say, here's the new workflow. And so Trainual was a tool we built for ourselves as kind of a leave behind for those consulting engagements. And so that led to some referrals, people wanting to use Trainual, which led to spinning off the software. So while I was consulting during that time is when I helped my friend Russ, who's the founder and CEO of Design Pickle, with some of their early systems. So he couldn't afford my consulting services, so he brought me in as a partner with that business. And so they've had tremendous success, over 500 employees around the world now, and it's been really fun watching their growth. But Trainual is the culmination of all of those things, of like what I did in my video company, of what I helped Russ do with Design Pickle, of what I worked with consulting clients for. And so I'm most passionate, most proud of what we're building today.
That's awesome. What is the biggest lesson you learned in the process of building this company?
Wow, good question. Biggest thing I've learned. Marketing is very important. I guess that's what I've learned. You obviously know that. You've got a podcast. When I was running Organized Chaos, it was totally referral driven. And I think that's the case with a lot of small businesses. You don't spend on advertising, you don't do marketing. And I always looked at marketing as like something you hire somebody else to do. And my brother, who is a marketer, he's our CMO now. That was always his thing. I would bring him in when I needed help. But in order to get traction to launch Trainual and to go from selling expensive consulting engagements to selling really cheap software subscriptions, you've got to do that at a massive scale. And that means getting people on board that's outside of your circle of influence, your friends. And so learning how to market, learning how to tell stories, and being comfortable putting that out into the world, I think is the biggest lesson I learned.
Yeah, and I think that's one of my questions actually about how entrepreneurs, I often ask, how has your approach on marketing changed or evolved once you got into business, right? Because oftentimes they started in the corporate world, they were just kind of, they just had to do their job. But once they take on the role of building a company, all of a sudden they just come to this realization, wow, you actually have to market and figure out how to sell, right? I'm happy to hear the kind of the transition. So what are some of the practical things you've done in your organization from an execution standpoint to make marketing a priority and also to use marketing to drive new business?
Well, you made a good point. A lot of people, they start by doing the work, and then as they try to grow the business, they see marketing as something they introduce down the road because they need to grow. And so for Trainual, it was something we actually introduced before even launching Trainual. Before we had any customers, any public website or anything, we hired a photographer to start following me around to my consulting meetings and kind of tell the story of creating and launching Trainual. And then we held a big launch event, a big launch party, which is, in a sense, marketing. It's inviting people to that. I invited reporters. I had a videographer there, a camera operator. And again, it's storytelling, but it was from day one. And so I think being comfortable capturing what's going on in a very authentic way, telling the story of here's what we're building, here's who it's for, here's why it exists. It attracted a lot of people to that product, rather than us down the road saying, oh, it's now we've got to figure out how to do marketing.
Most certainly. And I think I'm assuming you're doing a lot of partner marketing as well, because I saw your logo on Gusto website and you're deeply integrated with Gusto as well, right?
Yeah, we did a few integrations. So it started with Zapier just to connect to a bunch of automation, different tools, 1,000 different softwares. Gusto and Rippling were our first HR integrations. And so we wanted to partner with companies that are serving the same customer. And our customer is a growing small business. And so you figure any serious small business starts to offer payroll. Maybe if it's just you and a couple friends, you've got you're paying people with envelopes of cash or you're writing checks or something. But at some point, you get mature enough to offer payroll. And so it was a good indicator that we were sharing that customer and they also needed our service.
Awesome. As an entrepreneur, right, there's a lot of things that kind of keeps you motivated and keeps your drive. What's your why behind what you're doing today?
I want to change how small businesses work. So I've always been very passionate about process and organization. And, the consulting firm was called Organized Chaos, right? Everybody identifies with that because as you're building a business, it's total chaos. And the organization is kind of like taking a pause and saying, what exists here? Let me just sort this out a little bit. And so for me, that organization in a small business is about who does what in the company. And it's about, are we doing things the same way? And do we do things differently enough from our competitors to justify whatever price we're charging? And that DNA of your business is so crucial to growing a small company. And so Trainual is trying to create this new product, a new category for small growing businesses to capture that in a way that they never have. Because before using a tool like Trainual, most of that communication happens just by osmosis and sitting next to someone and having conversations with them. And you hear, institutional knowledge or tribal knowledge. And so Trainual is a new way to concretely write down in a tangible place, here's how we operate, here's how we work. And it's something that feels like an asset for the company because they can actually show it to someone and have some tangible proof of what they've been working so hard on. It's so I know that that's something I've always really valued in building my own businesses is having something to show for all the hard work, whether it's your business cards that you order, or the people's faces on your website, or whatever else it is. You want something to show for that you've built something substantial, and that's what Trainual does. And so I'm so motivated by helping more businesses accomplish that.
Yeah, I really love that why. And I think if I guess the most quoted quote that I've ever heard is, work on your business, not in your business, right?
Yeah.
And I think the first step toward that is documenting your process and procedures so you can start, kind of working on the business as opposed to being a practitioner in your business.
Yeah, so that's Michael Gerber from the E-Myth Revisited, and I'm friends with Michael. And the one thing I argue with him on this is I don't think it's as black and white as working on your business or in your business. I think across your business, there are so many different roles and responsibilities. And in some places, you'll be working in the business, and in other places, you'll be working on the business. And so I believe that it's about stripping back one responsibility at a time and delegating, passing those things off so that you just more narrowly focus on what you work on in the business until finally you can rise above getting the work done and only work on the business. But it sounds too good to be true when it's just like, on, flip the switch.
Yeah, and I think it's a dream for most entrepreneurs when they can be completely removed from the day-to-day operations and then just focus on the strategic things. I mean, that would be a dream come true for me as well. Obviously, as entrepreneurs, personal development is an important part, right? Because you are always constantly investing into others, so you have to be filling yourself. What are some of the things you're doing to make sure that you're consistently growing your knowledge and your skills?
Well, it starts with investing time and space in yourself. And so what I mean by that is the first 3 hours of every day are me meditating, journaling, going for a run, working out, taking my kids to school, like that sort of space. I think not enough entrepreneurs give themselves, because if you work from the time you wake up until the time you go to sleep, you don't have time to think. And when you can carve out a few hours to be, doing something, whether it's going for a run, exercising, journaling, what you're really doing is strategic planning. And a lot of business owners would wait and do this one day a year, or maybe they carve out like a couple hours a month and do that work. And I think if you can build a schedule to do that every single day, you are so far beyond everyone else because you're constantly giving yourself time to surface the best ideas for your business. So I think it starts with giving yourself that space. And so more tactically, what am I doing? I have several mentors that I meet with once a month. We have a board of directors now at Trainual, so I meet with a couple of our board members, a couple other advisors. I've got just looser mentors that are entrepreneurs that have built bigger companies than me that will meet up or get on Zoom with me, and I'm always engaging them. Podcasts, I'm a huge podcast junkie, so not just creating them but listening to them. Always consuming something in the car or otherwise, and then being a part of different mastermind groups. So I've been in a group, EO, Entrepreneur Organization, for over 10 years now. I've been in another group, YEC, the Young Entrepreneurs Council. There's a SaaS-specific group called SaaS Academy by my friend Dan Martell runs that group. It's an amazing group. Arizona, where I live, has this startup community, Startup Arizona. So it might sound like I'm over committed to those things, but like that is your job. As a founder, you need to surround yourself with other people that are thinking about the same things as you, because then when you have the problems, you almost intuitively can surface the answers. Whereas if you're just stuck working on the things in the office all the time, you don't get any of that outside experience.
Most certainly. I think you've touched on some of those key things. It's also kind of the personal branding aspect of it as well as an entrepreneur, right? When you talk about YEC, it's a great way to actually position yourself as a subject matter expert in this space, and people to start taking a note of you. And I'm assuming that's how you probably got an opportunity to publish books and write articles and all sorts of other stuff as well.
Yeah, so through some of these groups, they help you with publishing. Like through YEC, they have a partnership with the Forbes Council, and so you get articles published on Forbes. I have a column with Inc.com, and so I post on there. The book that I did was funny enough. It was when I was consulting, I sent out a weekly newsletter of one little hack for your business every week, and it was kind of like, hey, you've probably had this problem, and guess what? I found this tool that solves that problem, and here it is. So it was like 2 or 3 sentences every week. And so after doing that for over 2 years, I took my first 100 weeks of newsletters and just made it into a book. And it was 100 hacks to improve your business. And so I think the lesson there is that some of the content you can put out is repurposed content. Like we record this podcast right now, there'll probably be clips in here that end up on my podcast as like an excerpt from this show I did with you. And it's, instead of creating more work for yourself and everything having to be unique, think about how you can repurpose some of that content.
Most certainly. And I'm also thinking about publishing my own book from 101 episodes, because I'm actually having, subject matter experts like you coming on the show, sharing their knowledge and experience. And I want to kind of repurpose that into a book someday. So that's in my plan for future. Obviously,
I haven't seen, I've heard that from a lot of podcast hosts, and I haven't seen one yet. So my challenge to you would be actually do it, because a lot of people say they're going to do that.
Yes, I'll take you up on that challenge. So as entrepreneurs, right, we have, as founders, entrepreneurs, we are kind of playing between this leader role and occasionally that manager role. And sometimes you kind of have to play both roles because you have direct reports and things like that. Which mode do you normally operate in? And if so, how do you kind of get yourself out of being a super hyper manager?
So I don't believe in micromanaging. I think if you're micromanaging, it means you're not trusting someone. And so, our whole philosophy with Trainual is to empower employees, to empower your team members by over communicating proactively. You're giving someone the autonomy, you're giving them the training and the clear direction on how to do something and the clear outcome of what you're expecting. And if you do that, you don't have to micromanage. And so my belief is that leadership is less about managing people and it's more about just being helpful. When I have one-on-ones with all of my direct reports, it's always about what they're working on and what they want to get out of the week and what roadblocks they're hitting. And my job is more as a consultant or a coach to them to help them through it, rather than to tell them what to do in every situation. So I believe in communication and in trust and not in micromanagement.
Which brings me to my question about culture. Like, obviously you're talking about that trust and the culture of autonomy and things of that nature. What's your perspective for organizations when it comes to the type of culture they should be building?
Your culture already exists. Your culture is a representation of you. And so if you as a person don't trust people and want to be looking over their shoulder, then that's what's going to be reflected through your culture. And so for me, when I think about my video production company that I built, I moved out to Arizona, not because we had an office in Arizona, because my girlfriend, or who became my wife, we just wanted to live there. It was totally remote. Everybody was everywhere else. And so I had to learn how to operate the business from afar without looking over someone's shoulder. And I believe it was a huge asset to now growing Trainual. Obviously, we're in a world right now that's mostly remote first. And so you've got to trust the results. You hire good people that you believe can do a great job, and then you empower them to produce the results that you've clearly communicated. And if you're if that's the way you truly feel, then your culture will be a representation of that.
Awesome. Obviously, all entrepreneurs that I've ever met, they're all big visionaries, but many fail to kind of articulate that vision to the entire company and to mobilize them to action, right? What practical things have you done in terms of kind of getting the vision be bought in by the entire organization?
So it starts with when you first hire someone. We, of course, use our own system and we train people on, the mission, the vision, the milestones that we're trying to hit, the historical progress that we've made. And it gives them some confidence that, if they've done these things, they'll probably do the next things that they're setting out to achieve. I still do a live call with all of our new hires, and we hire people in cohorts, so a few people will start on the same day. But I'll always do a live presentation where I cast the vision and I show them whatever we're currently working on, so the current projects of the quarter, so they know how they fit in with their role to the current projects and how that ladders up to the vision. And then the vision is something you're always re-communicating. So it's not just that you set it and forget it, but we have quarterly all hands meetings that we are always pointing back to the 2022 mission and to the company's vision, and we're just re-articulating that stuff. We earlier this year, I wrote a small internal book, kind of like a manifesto, and sent it out to everyone, recorded an audio version of it and sent that out to everyone. And it was kind of just like, something I did over the summer and just got writing and couldn't stop writing and wanted everybody to be on the same page. So I think as a leader, you're always refining your vision and you're always recommunicating your vision so that everybody's aligned.
Yeah, systems and process are what makes an organization really scalable and can sustain and withstand, the struggles and stuff that you deal with, right? And obviously you're a king at creating systems and process, but many organizations don't really invest time and resources into it. What practical advice do you have for entrepreneurs, especially when they're getting started? How do you go about building systems and processes?
So I think systems and processes, I'm going to be a little contrarian here because I don't think they're required to scale. I think a lot of companies scale when they have really high demand for something. But then what happens is if you can't fulfill that thing reliably, consistently, you end up not having repeat customers. And so I think you can scale quickly without systems. But then when you notice that things are starting to break, that is kind of the universe telling you to put systems in place to shore up how you operate so that you can maintain this new level of demand that you've gone out and found. So early on, you need to start investing in systems, but you do it as needed. You're not going to build a perfectly systematized business from the get-go. You are going to figure out where you have pressure in your system. And, it's like a very simple example of this, a non-technical example almost, is like if every time somebody calls you, you have a couple qualifying questions that you're asking them. And you're realizing that they're getting your phone number on the website and then they call you and ask the same 3 questions. That's adding some stress to you. It's adding some time. It's adding some burden. And so if now on the website, you ask them to fill out those 3 questions before you show them the phone number, you've just introduced a very small system that saves you a little bit of time. And so that's like a very micro example, but these are the things that build over time in a business based on you wasting time and repeating yourself. And so it's something that you do over time.
Some businesses are, you can easily systematize because it's probably not super hyper technical or doesn't require a lot of thinking and strategy involved in how they deliver their product or service. But some businesses are extremely, high touch and requires people who are thinkers to actually get involved. So for a business like that, how do you actually systematize some of those thinking aspect of it?
So, I mean, if that were the case, if you couldn't systematize a business that was creative, that was a creative base, then you wouldn't have massive agencies, right? And those do exist. Like one of our customers at Trainual is Harmon Brothers, who does all the viral videos, like the Squatty Potty and those sort of things. And they, of course, can't they can't replicate or systematize the genius ideas that someone has on a whiteboard or something, but they can systematize everything else, the procedures around executing those ideas. And so there's a structure for meetings and intake for customers. There's a way that you bill people. There's a way that you track time and bill against your time. There's a way that you give your producers a briefing on a production that's going to happen in a studio. There's a way that you do inventory for all of your equipment when it's checked out for things. And so every business has these how-tos that support the creative process. And it's not a business's job to document how to do the creative thing, but it is your responsibility to document the protocols that support the creativity. So I'll give you one more example. If you think about like a surgeon, a brain surgeon or something, they are not going to come into your hospital and you hand them a book that teaches them how to do surgery. That would be crazy, right? Like they get all of that knowledge outside of your business. They go to school and learn and bring that into your operation. But you do teach them from hospital to hospital, what is the EMR system we use for medical records? Like what are the pre-surgery procedures in this room? Who's the team that I'm working with? What are the follow-up protocols here? Those things are specific to that business or to that hospital. And so it's not the creativity, it's not the subject matter expertise, but the processes in your business are what support those things.
So with then, I guess some of I guess my question would be like, okay, when do you realize, okay, certain functions of this organization cannot be systematized, that it requires the specialist who has the know-how, and then you just teach them on how we may operate within our organization with, a checklist or guides or whatever to do certain tasks. What point do you realize, okay, this is not something I can teach, this this particular function requires a specialist that I have to hire?
Well, that just takes you paring down all the things that you do inside the business and figuring out which ones are the hardest to replicate. So I'll give you another example. When I had my consulting firm, we had 2 other consultants that we eventually brought in. And a big part of how I did the consulting was using my experience as an entrepreneur to kind of be a third perspective, an outside perspective on the business that I would work in. And that wasn't something that I could just hire someone fresh out of college and implant that experience into their mindset. I had to hire other former entrepreneurs that had sold their business and had some of that perspective. And so instead of trying to teach someone how to do consulting, I hired people that had great experience for those things, but then we supported them with all the administrative functions of, here are the designed worksheets and guides and things that you fill out when you're on site with the client. Here is the script for the call that you do before you go on site. Here is the admin team that supports you with the billing and putting together the final reports and scheduling everything. And so again, it's you identify in your business the couple things that aren't easily replicatable. And that's the thing that you hire for experience. But all of the other things that are easy to train, you can document, you can delegate.
Yeah, so you obviously have been in the entrepreneurial space for quite some time. You've had, co-founded a couple of companies. So scaling, exiting, those are all conversations that you hear in the entrepreneurial circle. What's your perspective on growing organically versus raising capital? And what are your thoughts in terms of future for Trainual?
So Trainual is the first business that I raised outside capital for. And so it's been a really interesting experience going through this. And I'm a big fan of this process. But it's also very different. It's some people want to build a lifestyle company that supports them and pays them a salary over an extended period of time. And other people want to be on a high growth rocket ship, changing a market and have some big exit someday. And that's a very personal choice. So it's not that one path is right or wrong. If you're bootstrapping the business, you maintain all of the control, you aim for profitability, you grow more organically over time, you grow based on referrals, you're adding on incrementally every year. And that's how I grew my first 2 businesses. With a outside investor, there is now pressure on you to put that capital to work. And so you do things that you wouldn't normally do in an organic growth kind of business, because you're accelerating the growth by spending way more than you'd be comfortable spending if it was your money. And so it's a different ride altogether, but I'm having a lot of fun.
Awesome. We as entrepreneurs, the one resource that we don't have enough of is the time, right? So we got to always figure out how can we be hyper productive with our time. So are there any productivity hacks that you have that makes you super productive?
Tons. I mean, they're in my book. Other than that, I guess the number one thing that contributes to my productivity, I think, this may be this may be too typical, but I really believe in email and time management is at the center of your productivity. And so all of the emails that hit my inbox follow the inbox zero process, where you're either delegating it to someone else, you're deleting it, you're deferring it until a different time, or you're taking action, you're doing it right now. And so that 4Ds process of how you process email, I end every day with nothing in my inbox, and I believe it gives me tremendous peace of mind. So I highly recommend that tactic.
Do you actually, so you try to get to that zero inbox every day pretty much? So if you touch it once, you don't touch it again. Because I'm guilty of that. You open it, then you immediately realize, okay, I got I don't want to touch this right now, right? Then I'm unmarking it, right? And then I'm coming back to it again, which is completely a time waster sometime.
Yeah, well, what you're not doing right there is you're not deciding when you're going to touch it. Like not everything is relevant right now. But if I open something up, I'm either going to forward it to someone on my team, I'm going to archive it or delete it because it doesn't matter. I'm going to take action on it right now, or I'm going to schedule time that I'm going to do it. And that might be archiving the email and putting it on my to-do list. It might be putting it on my calendar. It might be snoozing that email to come back to me in a week when it makes more sense. But I'm taking action in some way. So it's you think of it like your physical mailbox. You don't ever look at your mail at the end of the day and stuff it all back into your mailbox. It would be so confusing. You would be like, well, what's the new mail today versus the mail that I got last week? It's so confusing. And so you want to take everything out. And in the same way you would like throw some junk mail away, you would delete the emails. And in the same way you might hand a letter to someone else in your family, you're forwarding an email to somebody. And in the same way that you might, take a task out of the email that's required of you to do and put it on your to-do list. It's like taking a check out of an envelope and throwing away the envelope, And then there's just other things that, you've got to do them at some point. And so you file them away on your own desk or you schedule time. So, I'm really passionate, if you can't tell, about that.
Productivity.
But it's a big hack for sure.
Do you actually time block when you check your emails though? Because I've heard that to be a hack. Certain people don't touch email. They check it once in the morning and once in the evening, and they don't check it all throughout the day.
No, I have a full schedule every day, and so I check email probably 2-3 times a day between meetings or whenever I can. But it's not on my calendar. No.
Awesome. What advice would you give your younger self, knowing what you know today?
I like the experience that I have, so I'm not sure I would have rushed anything or done anything very different. I think I would have gotten involved in software earlier, and the only reason I say that is the experience of starting to build software tools just really opened my eyes to what's possible. And as an entrepreneur forever that I was interested in solving problems, I just never knew that software development was a tool in the toolbox. And so if I could have told myself 20 years ago to go get involved with that, then I probably would have created some other businesses much sooner.
Yeah, and oftentimes though, like the experience of actually building a consulting business may have given you the idea of what a good software is. And we've kind of had that same experience as well. We built a technology internally for managing our own projects and reporting on client metrics. Then it turned out to be a SaaS product in the future. So totally. that also comes from that.
I had an idea for a second book once when I was consulting, and the idea was that for 52 weeks I was going to do a different job every week and take a year to work in different industries and different jobs for 1 week stints, because my thought was that it would create so many ideas and opportunities and innovations and like tell me what to work on next. So I was thinking of doing that, and I guess Trainual got in the way, but that's if I could go back, maybe I would do that.
Maybe you just interview one person who has a different job every week and find
that's
out.
That's not doing it. That's like, I think it's different when you're the one, packing the boxes or whatever.
So one final question, someone who's aspiring to be an entrepreneur, trying to get started, what advice would you give that person?
I would say, it depends on your risk tolerance. Just get exposure to business. Not everyone's going to start something out of high school like I did. Along the way, when I was in college, I interned at a management consulting firm while I was still running my video company, but I interned at a management consulting firm. And I learned so much in a summer internship that came into play years later when I started my own consulting business. And so I would say, if I was young and just getting started, just get exposure to a bunch of businesses and see how things work. And then when you've got an idea, you'll have some framework for how to build it yourself.
Awesome. Well, Chris, I appreciate you sparing this time with me and with our audience, and thanks for sharing some of your wisdom and knowledge.
Thank you. This was great.
Awesome.
This episode of Coffee with Closers is brought to you by One IMS. a leading digital marketing agency helping businesses win new customers. To request a free marketing ROI audit, please visit oneims.com. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. To make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe.